Welcome to TheoTrade. This is Don Kaufman. It's March 4th, 2019, and you are watching the TheoTrade evening video. Well, tonight's video, we're going to try to answer the question, is risk making a comeback? What effectively do I mean by that? Are we starting to see the emergence, if you will, of a bit more volatility in not only today's trading session, but in the days to come and even possibly months to come? First and foremost, again, the S&Ps are down about 1350. Now, they're doing that on decent volume, nothing crazy out there. We're trading about 1.5, 1.6 million contracts here coming into the close, which is just 12 minutes away. Now, we have rallied back way off the session lows. Nevertheless, as a trader, I will take any two-sided action I can possibly get. Let me kind of delineate a couple of things about the S&Ps, and then we're actually going to go point by point to answer, is risk effectively making a comeback? One of the first things that I do want to point out as we zoom into intraday trade, is this line across your screen happens to be the 2811. Now, I've spoken pretty much ad nauseum about these gravity points. So we broke off the 2811 gravity point. We headed effectively south from there. We really picked up some steam after we crossed through 2800. Now, the markets bottomed out kind of a mid-trading session, rallied back for the time being. One of the points I want to make about this rally back, look how lackluster some of the volume was when we actually made that rally back. That's not necessarily fair just to point out the biggest volume candle of the day, but you can clearly kind of see that the volume back to the bounce was negligible, to say the least. Now, volatility did make somewhat of a movement. Whether you're looking at the volatility futures, you're looking at the VIX, or as I often look at the VVIX, which is the volatility of the volatility index, which again kind of took off to the upside and kind of waned later in the trading session. But one of the big risk metrics we also happen to look at is effectively the bond markets. And the bond markets were down. Again, the bond market was effectively down in the pre-market and completely reversed, being up about 19 ticks here as we come into the close. Looks like we're going to close right in around this 2790, which, by the way, would not at all be a surprise given the fact that a huge amount of trade has occurred in this area in just recent sessions. In fact, with that, one other thing I want to point out before we move on for the S&P futures, what you're looking at right now happens to be a 30-day, again, a 30-day 1-hour chart. The first thing I'll kind of explain to you on this 30-day chart is, just as I said a moment ago, it's not surprising to see us close right in and around this particular level. It's been an area that we traded at, and I was talking about this extensively on TheoTrade in the chat room. We were trading the VWAP all last week. All last week we were trading like 27.88, 27.89, which was actually the VWAP. That's the volume weighted average price, yada, yada, yada. Algorithms absolutely eat that stuff up. And that's effectively where we're likely to close today. The other point that I wanted to make while we were still in the S&P futures, you kind of have to appreciate this point. All right, let's go back in time a little bit. Back in time to right here. Well, right there happens to be none other than February 15th. Here we are on March 4th. Do you realize that 3 weeks of sputtering around slightly higher in the S&Ps was undone in effectively 2 hours? Why do I say 2 hours? Because these are hour candles. There's 1 hour, here's 2 hours. You can't even count the third hour. But in 2 hours, we just undid all of the upside that we were, all the ground we gained in the last 3 weeks. And that, people, is very often why I, again, continue to have a very bearish tone for the overall marketplace. Now, let's make a couple of points to answer that question. Is risk really kind of making a comeback? A few things that really stood out inside of today's trade that aren't necessarily, this is not something you can glance at this screen and see. The number one point that I want to make, I'm going to cruise over to this market watch. Now, market watch, this is the index watch. This is the S&P 100. Okay, I like to look at the S&P 100 for what I term correlated states. I'm going to close up that left side bar, and I'm going to actually draw it on the screen over here. During today's trading session, at times, we actually saw 90 advancers, 10 decliners. Meanwhile, that was early in trade today. Meanwhile, we also saw 90 decliners, 10 advancers. There's actually hit even higher than that at one point. I actually saw over 93 advancers, and at one point to the downside, we had 94 decliners. Nevertheless, okay, correlation today was the name of the game. What that effectively meant is that as the S&Ps move, they're going to shove order flow through statistical arbitrage. They're going to shove order flow to every component of the S&P 500. Granted, I have the S&P 100 up here, but the other 400 stocks, they're going to follow suit. So we're in a highly correlated state multiple times in today's trading session, which is, again, it's much more indicative of risk kind of coming back into play in the marketplace. All right, let's go to the second point. The second point to be made, were you watching Boeing today? Now, it was just over a week ago on the weekend video, I mentioned what I termed the single most important stock in the entire marketplace. That happened to effectively be Boeing. Because Boeing is such a large component of the Dow, it's effectively double, okay, any other individual stock in the Dow in terms of its effectiveness to move the Dow. The other major one would be United Healthcare, which had a rough day today as well. Nevertheless, were you watching Boeing? Because Boeing has the power to actually move markets, especially markets that happen to be heavily correlated. Boeing, almost out of the gate this morning, has seen sell-side activity. Okay, only to rebound, but rebound mildly. Again, point to be made over here, the volume was there in the morning and kind of waned in the afternoon. So the volume really cooled out in the afternoon. And I know a lot of people are looking at this as a victory, if you will, for more bullish traders because the market did bounce back. But effectively, what I see over here, a couple of people covered. And here we are again with absolutely no liquidity whatsoever late the trading session. So Boeing actually led a lot of the sell side activity. Now, with Boeing, then comes the financials. The financials had a massive, major reversal today, okay, and hit the exact same level to the penny that we actually tagged, okay, last week, and that is right around this 26.94. Hit it, reversed off of it. The line across your screen, across the screen here, happens to be none other than 26.50. Okay, don't be surprised to see us close in 26.50. We've talked about that as well ad nauseum. We're pretty much on the 26.50 level, which again is indicative of kind of our risk metric. If we're under 26.50, the marketplace was full of risk, chock full of risk. Above, again, the 26.50, and the market was effectively rather bullish at that point in time. So again, the bonds rallied, forcing the financials to reverse on the trading session. The financials kind of led on a percentage basis in terms of a major ETF, and again, a major sector inside of the broader S&Ps. Next on the list that you just have to really gather this one, in answering this question, is risk making a comeback? Do you realize that the monsters of tech, that is effectively the conglomerate of Facebook and Apple and Microsoft and Google and Amazon and more and my, do you realize that they were up today by the tune, most of this trading session, in that tune of about maybe 0.9%. So we actually had, if you will, a fairly substantial rally in these underlyings. Microsoft, again, was down substantially more earlier in the trading session, rebounded a little bit. But Facebook up over 3%, Amazon up over 1.5%. And the reason that I bring this to your attention, okay, and when asking this, and trying to answer the question, is risk coming back into play? Okay, what would this marketplace have looked like? What would it look like if these underlyings started to actually fall, okay, along with some of the broader marketplace? Okay, and that, again, totally up for debate. Nevertheless, okay, this is a marketplace that was under some pretty serious duress, where the S&Ps actually tagged all the way to 2767, and yet the monsters of tech were up, and up substantially so throughout the course of the trading session. Again, if you look at the correlations that I was talking about earlier, where there's like 90 stocks down, you got to realize that the 5 or 6 stocks that were up at a portion of the day, it was Facebook and Amazon, right? And at that point in the trading session, it looked hideous. If Facebook, Amazon had seen some sell-side activity, the S&Ps could have dropped 50. That's a good point to be made over there, and you need to keep that and be mindful of it. Now, there's two major products that are kind of bucking the trend today, and this is where I see some opportunity coming. The emerging markets. The emerging markets are going to end the day massively unchanged, which is unusual given the fact that we're actually seeing a degree of strength in the dollar. The other one, okay, and these are trades that we're going to be talking about extensively in the TheoTrade chat room in the next few days. The other one, FXI, which is China. Okay, China is, again, it's going to end the day up almost 0.5% in what has become, again, a day where the S&Ps are going to be down about 0.5%. In this particular case, China looking like it's going to bear some fruit here in the near term for us to grab a trade in and around. Listen, it's a lot to think about in this session. This is just, if you will, the emergence of what appears to be, okay, finally a break inside of an unrelenting rally. We're going to see how the next couple of days kind of shake out in this marketplace. Nevertheless, feels a bit like risk is making a comeback. Thanks everybody for joining us here at TheoTrade. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.